Well, some of this ties back to most of it's freestanding. I've been a fire protection engineer or firefighter for about 50 years. I started my life as a firefighter in a major county in the Maryland area, in the Washington, D.C. suburbs. Went to the University of Maryland, got a degree in engineering, and I've been a fire protection consultant for many decades. For the past 25 or so, it's been pretty focused on the hotel and lodging industry. And with that, I get a little bit of exposure to restaurant challenges. Today, I'm just going to, and this is going to be very quick. I just want to touch on three things. Some of it is a recap. In our presentation 2 years ago, I talked about how the industry reacted over a many year period of time and came up with the solutions we see today to manage the fire protection challenge in the hotel industry. You don't solve it, you manage, you know the tools, and that's why we do some of the things we do. They came out of some hard lessons. I'll toss in some carbon monoxide loss experience too. That's a high priority for folks. The main part I want to talk about for this is what can you do? I want to offer these for your consideration in your facility. Use your good judgment to improve your fire protection. And when I say fire protection, really, we handle a lot of hazards, carbon monoxide being one, but you can also have storms, etc. Most fire service organizations are multi-hazard anymore, and pretty much at a hotel level, you are too. What are the principal elements of a fire and hazard prevention plan? Let's talk quickly about our fire protection features and systems. Some or none might be in your facilities. Fire protection and CO policies and procedures, and then appropriate staff training. If you get most of these 5 bullets right, you should have a pretty good facility program at your hotel or restaurant. You got to think through it a little bit though, to make sure that they all work together. If we have time, I want to talk about a new challenge that we're seeing from time to time. It's especially highlighted in New York. It has to do with lithium-ion batteries, but AHLA is just forming a task force on lithium-ion batteries and the fire challenges there. So recap of history, 2 minutes or less. The industry was over many years had a lot of fires. The communications at the time, you didn't realize that you could have a small limited service property in a pretty obscure place, have a 5-person, 5 fatality hotel fire, and you'd never hear about it in the 60s or 70s. We didn't have CNN, we didn't have social media, we didn't have a lot of things. But these several fires in the 80s, you can really see it's crossroads for the industry. And if you add all that up, it's several hundred people dead. In the early 80s, had over 100 fatalities in just those 5 incidents. And the industry at some quarters thought this was everybody's headed for bankruptcy. Just the costs and how to do things just wasn't clear. But that changed. A lot of things happened, and a lot of those were protective systems, procedures. And this is a slide I showed last year. I don't have one better than this. Things changed so radically from 1980 to 07 that most studies aren't published anymore. But you can see, and a stat from 2016 from the Fire Administration shows they track, the statisticians track that we have about 4,000 fire incidents in lodging facilities in the U.S. each year. I think that's overstated. If they're there, they're small, but you can see the radical change that occurred from the time of the bad fire incidents down to now. Another slide from last year, 2022, you see where our residential fires in the lodging industry, where it sort of fits. It's in a tiny area. Most of the fire problem in this country exists in 1 and 2 family homes. That number is a stubborn number. It hasn't changed that much over time, but our hotel incidents have, and they have for good reason. And these are the things I'm going to talk about now. One last slide on where fires happen, and this goes to the combination of folks on this call from the restaurant industry to hotels. Leading cause of hotel and motel fires is cooking of different types, but over half, and this is a fairly new stat, the other sources are multiples less. Appliances, excuse me, heating, electrical malfunctions, and intentional set or arson fires. They're all much smaller than our cooking fires. On carbon monoxide, since my talk in June of 2022, we track a sort of public database that tells us quite a bit about what's going on in the country if it's published. So since that time, we've uncovered 14 incidents in hotels involving carbon monoxide with 45 injuries and 1 fatality. The 45 injuries occurred in 5 incidents. The fatality was in a separate 6-incident in Michigan. A little data on that incident. It was a hotel employee was overcome by CO in a mechanical room. No one found him for a few days. There's a whole lot of things that went wrong with this particular incident. And just recently, in the last several months, the Michigan Department of Labor has issued at least 8 citations against the owner with over $150,000 fines and likely civil criminal referral to the state attorney general. And these don't include the other civil lawsuits that'll be out there. So there's a big impact. We say we're doing better. We still have incidents, and every incident seems to have some sort of a victim in it. Sometimes we have none. Sometimes we do. Everything has an impact, though. So even though our numbers are smaller, they're still impactful. All right. So thoughts on fire safety in your facilities. Number one goal is to prevent emergency incidents. Sprinkler systems and fire alarms do not prevent emergency incidents or fires. They react to them. So you need to have a strong fire prevention program. A lot of this is very basic stuff. It hasn't changed. It doesn't change from occupancy to occupancy. Just good sound management of your facilities means a lot. Other key aspect is life safety. We need to be focused on guests, employees, and any other building occupants on their life safety, protection from hazards, good exits, etc. Code and regulatory compliance. You need to meet the law. One of the brand standards from a major hotelier starts with almost the number one rule: follow the law. It's some of the best advice that can be given to an operator, is that you be conscious of your obligations under the law. Just because you meet the standard or a code doesn't necessarily mean you're going to be fully 100% fire safe. That's not always true. Sometimes it is, sometimes not. General property protection, your insurance company particularly wants you to protect your property, provide the systems and maintain the systems that are needed. Some unique aspects for the last 3 bullets. If you have a unique historic building, can everyone hear me now?
Yes.
Okay. The last 3 things are somewhat unique. If you have a historic building and you were to lose that to fire, could you rebuild in the same manner? Sometimes historic preservation throws us a curveball in the fire protection engineering world. You have community considerations, reputational assets. Your fire safety goals should be pretty wide. You want to react to a fire incident. They will occur from time to time. You just want to be able to react to them and maintain your business in a steady state as possible. All right, step 1, I call it a rigorous self-assessment. Be honest with yourself and what you have in your facility. Look at your existing assets. Do you have a fire and hazard prevention plan of any sort? What does it look like? What's the shape of your protective systems? Even as if it's simply a fire extinguisher, whatever equipment you have, needs to be documented and be in good condition. You need emergency plans and employee training that go with those emergency plans. The best plan sitting on a shelf that's not looked at is no plan. It can be well written, but if it's not practiced and give an emphasis with employees that these are important things. If you're the leadership of the property, that you value these things and they need to be high priority for employees. Relationships with your local emergency responders are important as well. The last thing you want to do is meet the fire officer in your driveway at 2 o'clock in the morning with a problem. It'd be nice to have that organization, whatever it is, fire company, police, into your facility ahead of time and do some sort of pre-planning of the building. You can look at the existing conditions. Do we have the right systems? Are they maintained? Inspection, testing, and maintenance is just key in the fire protection world. We don't use the equipment that often, so inspection, testing, and maintenance uncovers if the equipment is ready and able to serve when we need it to do its job. Fire prevention, low-tech stuff, but all important. I start with general housekeeping. Remove clutter and unneeded combustibles. Electrical safety is huge. Remove abandoned equipment and wiring. If you've, under the old codes, you were able to just sort of walk away from a piece of equipment, not so good. You really do need to keep a clean building. It's a lot easier to work with. Only use licensed and experienced service personnel. That's true of electrical, it's true of HVAC. And conduct regular inspection of equipment. Regular can be you walking through the building every morning and noticing if something's not in the right place. Ignition source control, especially in hotels, candle use, auxiliary heating equipment. Smoking, probably done a pretty good job of that over the last decade or so. That probably materially contributes to a lowering loss experience. If you're doing any sort of modification or construction, even if you're just having someone come in to work on pipes, what are they doing with hot work? Cutting, welding, brazing, anything like that has to be controlled. For the joint audience here, I should have put this probably as number one, but cooking hazards. We see in that number of incidents in hotels, cooking is an important factor. And so our cooking hazards, you need comprehensive kitchen procedures for all cooking equipment. People need to be trained on that equipment. One of the counts in the Michigan case was not just that the gentleman died in the incident, but he was not trained in the equipment he was supposed to be his charge to maintain. He was not trained at all. So make sure your employees are trained in the equipment that they're using. And it's particularly true of cooking equipment. Any of our fryers, anything, and this is quotes right out of the code, that produces grease-laden vapors. That's what we're looking for. You need to vent it, clean the vents, and have specialized fire protection equipment available. Fireplaces, hazardous material safety, particularly flammable liquids, your security, screening for employment. That to me is a arson prevention step somewhere in there. And then for carbon monoxide, you need to have good equipment maintenance on your fuel burning equipment. That's shown time in and time out, saves a lot of incidents if we simply prevent them back at the equipment. So we get into our protective systems, and I like to think that we have a strategy and about 5 elements work together to keep us safe. We're assuming we have an incident, and what happens? Well, what we hope happens is the fire rated structure keeps the fire to a small size. Our firewalls, our fire doors, they all matter. And if you read the literature, it matters whether we get the fire incident confined to the first compartment or it generates past the first compartment of origin. So fire rated construction, doors, windows, doors and walls kept in good condition. Our fire detection, kind of crossing the circle, that's going to early on tell us of an incident, and hopefully our fire suppression is going to take care of it if necessary, if it's large enough. We have our means of egress to remove folks from the building in a safe manner, and then we have emergency power to keep things going while we may be losing power. So all these things work together in a, I wouldn't say seamless way, but they go hand in glove, working together to give us a safe envelope in the buildings. See one more depiction of that. So our fire doors, fire walls, keeping good. They're passive, keep them in good condition. I have NFPA 80 noted next to fire doors. There is a often, if not 100% overlooked inspection obligation in there on an annual basis to at least do a minimal review and document it of your fire doors. And in legal cases, that one's popped up as a hole in a protective program, and it has caused people to have problems, but it's overlooked more than it's actually used. Fire alarm systems, these are basically anymore, even the small ones in some of the smallest buildings, they're basically microprocessors. They're telling us what's out there, what's in the field. We have devices that are monitoring for smoke or carbon monoxide and come back to a fire alarm control unit that integrates it. We consider them intelligent. Some are, some are not. They're not smart enough to turn off when we don't need them. And the key thing here is your fire alarm systems have some level of obsolescence built into them because they're basically a digital system, and all digital systems have a shelf life. More on fire alarms. We process the input signals from our fire smoke detectors or CO detectors, and we spit out, an alarm, a supervisory condition, or a trouble. Pretty basic operation of a fire alarm. Different types of smoke and CO detectors. We have a system type detector on the left that is low voltage. To make any noise from it, we have to have that sounder base on it. Otherwise, it doesn't make a noise. It simply signals back to the control unit. Or a lot of times in the United States, you'll see local smoke alarms that are house powered. They don't connect to a central facility, but they are always up close and personal to the incident and sound in the alarm. We've now moved to 10-year batteries. You don't replace batteries in detectors, smoke alarms anymore. You replace the unit. Similarly with carbon monoxide units, and their frequency can be a little bit different, but we do have combination CO and smoke alarms used fairly often in the hotel industry. In the state of Maine, you have a unique rule. I think New York City is putting one in similar to this, but based on an incident that occurred in your state, I believe in 2021, there's now a fuel gas detection requirement if you have a combustible gas being used in a facility, flammable gas being used in a facility, you have an obligation to have a gas detector in that building. Clearly, a hotel, motel, or inn are one of the occupancies that this rule comes under. So again, you should be in compliance now. If not, I would be looking into it. Basics on sprinklers. We have piping, we have sprinkler heads, we have a water supply and pumps most of the time. Pretty basic, needs to be kept in good condition. In terms of a plus for our industry in the United States and fires and hotels, sprinklers matter. They matter a great deal. So if you have them, keep them in good shape. One aspect in Maine that you have, probably a little late in the year for this, the fire marshal office maintains a seasonal shutdown policy that's not common in the rest of the country to shut down a building and sprinkler system. But I think it's been done pretty successfully in your state for many years. But the state fire marshal has, I think it's a voluntary policy that has their office aware of what you're doing, the local fire department and your alarm companies. So if you do such a thing, I would avail myself of the Maine Fire Marshal's webpage. They have some good information on that. Let's get back to those kitchen hoods and duct systems. We have combustible greases and fats. Industry changed out the grease style in the late 90s. So we ended up with a new standard, at that time new, but now a couple decades old, called UL 300. And UL 300, if your extinguishing system meets that standard, which all should at this point, run across some occasionally that don't, but all should, if you have that, you should be in pretty good shape in the event of an incident. That said, you still have to do good maintenance on the system, clean your exhaust ducts, and train your folks in the use of all of that equipment. So UL 300 is the key standard for all of your suppression systems in your kitchen. You can read that on the storage bottles that typically hang on the ceiling, or you can check with your maintenance firm. If you don't have a maintenance firm, you should get a maintenance firm. And final area on, particularly on kitchen fires, is you want to be sure that you're using a Class K extinguisher in the kitchen areas that handles those grease fires. Water only units won't work, and the ABC units not only won't work, they'll also make a complete mess. So we go to the Class Ks with training. Means of egress, like I said, clutter is our enemy. So I challenge you to walk to a remote location in your building and exit to a place of safety without using your customary route. Try that out in your building. Go to an obscure place and go to a place of safety and note what you see in that path of travel. Is it clear or is it cluttered? Are the ramps and stairs in good conditions? Do you have proper signage? And what would happen if you lost power? Ask yourself those questions in a 5 or 10 minute self drill on what your building's means of egress look like. This is gelling down from multi-inch code books on the life safety code. But at the level of building operation, if you do these things, you'll get a good idea whether you're in good shape or you have a significant problem. Emergency power, that's key to us. We've got to maintain what you do in steady state. A steady state building is one thing. When an emergency happens, other things begin to happen, and we have to be certain that that power load is there. And if it's going to be there, if you're counting on that for an appreciable period of time, you have to be very conscious of the fuel capacity, the demand on the system, the fuel capacity, and then you may need a refueling plan. And some of these larger storms, from Superstorm Sandy to the hurricanes down here in the South, the best laid plans have come apart when you couldn't get a fuel truck to an emergency generator that had been running for 8 hours and probably really needed to run for 8 days. So that refueling plan is important, particularly in natural hazard situations. Fire protection policies and procedures, you need them, and they should be in writing and they should be practiced. If they haven't come out of those books in a while that you have, get them out. You need sound inspection, testing, and maintenance. And one of the most important things that I'm finding, as I still do accurate reviews in hotels, our protection system documentation. That means the as-built for the fire alarm, the as-built for the sprinkler system, the as-built for the fire pump. You really need to be able to reach out and touch those. You may not have a dedicated fire command center in your building, but you should have an area prepared to operate as an emergency center. And this kind of documentation should be close at hand. The inspection, testing, and maintenance, a basic drawing of the building, and then the protective system documentation. By the way, they're all deliverables under the code. If a contractor installed a fire alarm system or a sprinkler system in your building, that contractor was obligated under the code to give you accurate documentation. It's a deliverable. And we get the staff training. Very important. That's in a non-emergency condition. We're just operating the property. Basically, you have your antenna up to see if there are problems that may, situations that may devolve into a problem. And then we get into some level of emergency incident management that most of your employees should have some degree of exposure to. Basic things, accountability. Where are the people? I know when I read the some of the information at the fire that happened in Kittery, there was some confusion about accounting for people, not unknown in emergencies. When you change shifts, you should probably have a very deliberate shift change procedure that talks about the condition of the building, what's in service, what's out of service. If for instance, you've got a piece of a protective system being worked on, that should be handed off as shift change. All individuals working in a property or restaurant should understand what alarm procedures are. What do alarms sound like? We have a lot of noise and alarms in the world these days, from CO alarms to different style sprinkler or fire alarm sounds, refrigeration unit. What do all those mean? And do employees understand what they are and what they should be doing when those alarms sound? And then what are our interfaces with the fire and emergency responders? In the procedure, yes, you might have a fire alarm system that's going to send a signal to the fire department, but it should be backed up by a phone call from the hotel to explain the emergency. So should be in the procedures. We don't rely upon just one thing. And I have this occasionally, your staff, the eyes and ears of the property, they're out there seeing what you can't see all the time, and they are just fundamentally important to these plans. So that's my quick and dirty on a program for your facilities. I'll give this to Kathleen if it's any use to you. Just wanted to get some joggers out here that would get you thinking about what your emergency procedures look like. What does your equipment look like? What are your goals? What are your aims? And just use your common sense to engage some of these things. You can reach out to your fire department, reach out to your fire protection equipment folks for some resources, insurance company. There's a lot of resources out there, but start with your own intuitions. If you're on this call, you've accomplished something in life, and you can use your own intuitions to kind of see the starting point. Hopefully, you can see the starting point. So let me just close with one more slide, and this is an experience that's happening in New York. AHLA, as I said, we're in the opening steps of forming a task group on lithium-ion batteries. But New York's had a really, it may be unique to them because the number of people and the number of e-scooters that are used in the city, particularly for delivery folks. So there's a lot of dynamics here that don't apply to other jurisdictions. But it just is a good example of a fire phenomena that crept up on us over the years. And FDNY started tracking just a few years ago. They realized their call volume was going up significantly. So they started to really track things. And you can see from 21, where they had over 100 incidents and number of injuries and fatalities, to this year, or this last year, they believe they had 253 incidents, 150 injuries, and 18 fatalities. If you all caught the news of a pretty spectacular fire, I believe in Queens in the last week, involving rope rescues, FDNY had to resort to rappelling down buildings and plucking 3 people off the side of a building. Rarely happens to do it one time, but they did it 3 times in one fire, and that was an e-bike fire. I think somebody was a fatality in that one as well. But more and more folks are seeing lithium-ion batteries in the lodging industry. So as I said, HLA is forming a task group to just see what that means and be able to react to it. So, well, Kathleen, that's the main part of my my presentation today. Hopefully there's something in there. Hopefully I got it in the time, and you had some nuggets in there that might be of use to you.
It was perfect. Great information. Everyone's finding it very helpful.
Good.
I will have a copy of this, and I will be sharing it. This has also been recorded, so we will share it with membership. And thank you so much, Byron.
Thank you for having me.
Anyone have any lingering questions? You can put them in the chat, but